ships were of newer stock and more advanced. The final stroke was handed down by the Federation. A special ship was escorted onto the battlefield by heavily armed attack cruisers which engaged the Akpuru ships, while a majority of the rest of the fleet I said escaped, but it should be retreated, I think, rather than escaped. This ship was special and contained an extremely powerful weapon that was one of a kind and would never be built again, a solar collapser. This devastating weapon was fired into Gamma Draconis, and within 2 minutes the star went nova, taking out the entire Akpuru fleet, which had been called into action by the 6th and 8th Divisions that originally had instigated the battle along with it. It was after this that the Akpuru surrendered to the Federation on several conditions. First, that a new government be ratified that would be decentralized to give the Outer Rim systems more power within the government and better control over local resources. Second, that the delegation of the governmental body delegates be comprised of no less than 25% of individuals elected from the Outer Rim systems. Finally, that the Outer Rim worlds be granted some basic autonomy and allowed to maintain their own militias. The Federation agreed to these terms, and IC3 was brought to a close in 3642. It would be a difficult 78 years after this treaty was signed before it would be completely fulfilled. It was at this point that the Earth Alliance was born, on August 23rd, 3720. A date chosen by no coincidence, but as a reminder and a statement to those that would attempt to break the Earth Alliance, that even in its darkest hour, humanity would not fade into the background, defeated and broken. Nearly all of the Articles of Surrender were met by the Articles of Incorporation drafted. However, there was no autonomy granted to the Outer Rim worlds. Instead, rigid governmental structures were put into place in each and every system that were elected by local populations, and these populations would also vote on delegates to represent them in the governmental body. While this breach of the treaty was overlooked, as many of the problems associated with the wars were now solved, it would cause a rift that would never fully heal between the more hardline ideologues and the moderate ones. In 3742, the Earth Alliance became aware of a governmental body that incorporated nearly half of the known galaxy by means of alliances with alien races. It also learned that civilizations could submit themselves for a reviewing process for petition to join this galactic body. By 3745, the Earth Alliance had made its first formal petition. It was denied very quickly, but the director of the Earth Alliance, a woman by the name of Helena Morgenthau, would not take no for an answer. She would petition the Galactic Parliament 3 more times before the petition would be ratified in 3764. It was later revealed that humanity was allowed to join for 4 reasons, 3 of which are made patently clear by one influential Dracian representative. First, humanity would not stop expansion unless bound by the Articles of Incorporation. Second, humanity possessed a will for exploration and curiosity rarely seen among the other races. Third, humanity had the second largest fleet at the time in the galaxy. And finally, because humanity possessed technology that no one else did, the manufacturing process for Draconic, of which there was nothing else similar in the known galaxy. On these merits, humanity was accepted into the Galactic Society. So that's the Terran race history there, and I do have the race history also for the Sluikan and for the the Telvari. So let's go ahead and get into those now. So I guess we'll go with Sluikan first. Let's go in, well, let's see, Terrans, so we're going, not alphabetical order, so we'll just go with Sluikan next. Whew, good, excuse me. The Sluikan are a very violent and paranoid race. In the past, the Sluikan were held back technologically because they had a habit of destroying their civilization about every 3 decades through war. This pattern of advancement and then destruction had been going on Sistel, the Sluikan homeworld, for eons. For as long as the Odyssian and Telvari could remember, this had been the state of things in that void forsaken world. And with their longevity and memory capacity, that means it's been going on for a very long time. However, about 15,000 years before they were begrudgingly allowed entrance into the galactic government as a member race, a single Sluikan united his people, something that no other Sluikan had managed to do before that. The Sluikan was known as Varth Yisl. He was a mighty warrior known for being able to take down Romanji boars, wild animals stronger than stronger than a dozen Sluikan males with his bare hands. During the last great war in Sistel, Varth amassed a large army and swept across a single continent of the planet like a plague of locusts. Anyone against him was slaughtered, with no mercy given nor received. On this slaughter went for 5 months before every tribe left submitted to him in inferiority, and he did something that no other leader had done before him. He decried all the death that he had visited upon his people. He cursed the old ways and instead encouraged everyone around him with dreams of a more noble, more honorable future, where all Sluikan lived in peace with each other while seeking and winning in combat against those not like them. Varth had encountered a crashed. The reason for this was that Varth had encountered a crashed alien ship during the war, and had learned that they were not alone in the galaxy. That many priests stalked the stars above waiting to be conquered, and that this ideal could be used to unite his people. His plea was heard and answered, and the Sluikan, for the first time in 10,000 years, took a step forward in the direction of creating a lasting civilization. It would be a harsh 70 years for Varth, as the sociological problems with the Sluikan not warring with each other began to manifest outwardly. There were several times when it seemed as though their empire would fall apart at the seams, but somehow he had managed to hold it together, though not always without employing violence and murder. But to him, the end justified the means. Within 900 years, the Sluikan had built a whole armada of ships, and were exploring their local system. In another 50, they colonized their first 8 worlds, 6 of them being within their home system, and 2 more in a nearby system. This was the point that the Sluikan Empire was born, forged in the blood of their enemies, which had been cleaned off the 2 planets in the system known to them as Krullit. Now I want to go look up something real quick, because I have some other stuff on their race history. Just kind of flesh it out a bit more. I think it's talking about the war or something. Let's see. Need to open up my folder for Odyssian Void here. About underneath files. No, it'll be an about. Events, places, races. Okay, so I did change it a bit. Let me go ahead and read this one. Oh wow, it's like I'm gonna have to do a lot of scrolling for this. Okay, it's still recording. So it pretty much reads the same as the other race history, but it has a little bit more in it. It's a little bit better worded. So here we go. The Sluikan are a very violent race of humanoid reptiles. In appearance, they closely resemble bipedal. Actually, this is the race description, I think. We'll do it anyway because it gives a little more insight. They resemble bipedal snakes. Sinuous bodies. They have lithe, sinuous bodies, flat and hooded heads, and other snake-like features, along with a tri-forked tongue that allows them to smell, taste, and detect pheromones. The Sluikan history is littered with dead from countless wars on their home planet of Sistel. As far as planets that have given rise to spacefaring civilizations, Sistel is extremely unique. It has only one continent, which covers about 83% of the planet. Crammed onto this one landmass is an entire civilization of billions. Sistel has a very arid climate due to the fact that it has a small ocean, and much of the land is desert. These harsh conditions had kept the Sluikan in a perpetual state of war for their entire history. Tribes would grow, causing strains on supplies and necessitating encroaching on other tribes' territory for resources. These tribes would then retaliate with force to protect their land, and a war would spark off that would draw in many other tribes. This would depopulate the tribes and start the cycle anew. This went on for millennia, and because of it, the Sluikan race's development as a civilization was curtailed. At one point, they had managed to build a patchwork of thriving cities during an abnormal period of peace, but that too was shattered, and their cities were laid to waste. Over the years, many great warlords came close to unifying all the tribes, but the inherent nature of the Sluikan made it almost impossible for long-term alliances to be maintained. Everything about their evolution was centered around the fittest and strongest. Everything about their evolution was centered around the fittest and the strongest eating the weak. Okay, well, it should be eating, not eat. And I'm not sure if I mean that metaphorically or literally yet. Let me see. Maybe I did specify. It is in their blood to be devious, barbaric, and ruthless to ensure their own survival. So maybe it was literally. Maybe both, actually. Literally and metaphorically. If not for this tenacity, however, many scholars believe the Sluikan race would have perished long ago. But this was how the Sluikan were before the Great Awakening, as they call it. This event came about after a particularly bloody war drove them to the brink of extinction. A great warlord called Varth Ysthel led a highly successful campaign across the entire continent, and had conquered almost every clan, and those that he could not, he destroyed. Over 900 million Sluikan have been killed, about 83% of the population at the time, when Varth saw the swath of destruction his campaign had caused, he used his clout to do something no other victorious warlord had ever done. He decried the slaughter of his people and charged all that remained with changing their traditions, their very being, to prevent this from ever happening again. This was no easy objective, and more than once war was sparked for short duration as the different tribes clashed with each other while trying to adhere to Varth's commandment. And more than once he was forced to execute leaders of various tribes to maintain order. Let me see if I can grab this and reform it. It's like really freaking hard to read because I have to scroll left while I'm reading and it messes around with the text. Can't really follow it very well. Put it into Word here. And, okay, yeah, this is a lot better. Okay, let's see. Burgeoning Empire. Executed. Okay, there we go. Varth ruled over his burgeoning empire with a iron-scaled fist, for he knew that the outcome of his endeavor could launch the Sluikan into a new area of prosperity that no one else could dare dream of. His vision was brought about by a stark realization during his campaign. After one vicious battle, he was surveying the carnage when he saw a star fall from the sky and crash into the ground at 5 Kedjul, which is Sluikan for miles, from where he stood. And I know I've heard Kedjul somewhere else before, I can't remember where though. And if it's from Star Trek, if it's a Klingon word, I'd be just completely not amazed at all. Because I think that's where I heard it from. No, there's this Kedjul, something else. Yeah, maybe it's Kedjul, I don't know. I think Star Trek Next Generation is the only time you ever hear actual Klingon speak on a bridge of a Klingon ship. But, so that might be from the Klingons. But I guess that fits in kind of with what I was going for the idea of what the Sluikan would be like. Upon investigation, he found that this was not a star, but a structure of some kind made from a metal he had never seen before. What he had found was an alien ship that had crashed into Sistel. He learned how to operate the controls, what controls remained, and gained access to a database of information. He eventually learned that they were not alone in the galaxy, that many prey stalked the stars above waiting to be hunted, and that this could be used to tame the savage nature of his people into a civilization that would make the heavens quake with fear. And this is kind of mixing the Herodian into this a bit too, in terms of the hunting kind of stuff. Again, it's more Star Trek stuff. I'm probably one of the biggest Star Trek nerds ever existing. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, so a lot of that's going to be present in the lore for this game. Some of the different ideas. Vorth was wily. He hid this information from the rest of his people until he judged the time right. Within 50 years of the last Great War, Sistel was a veritable metropolis with a massive city covering the entirety of its single continent, and a population bordering on 10 billion. Vorth was now the supreme leader of the Sluikan heraldry, and as he had declared their empire's name to be, or that should have been an ending sentence, so it sounds like there's more to it. It should have been, as he decreed their empire's name to be. That's what it should have been. Inflections should have been. When his people were on the cusp of attaining the technology for space travel, he revealed what he had learned all those years ago, and as he guessed, this news galvanized his people. Within 2 years, the Sluikan had built 15 space-worthy invasion vessels, and 200,000 soldiers and colonists were sent out on these ships to whatever outcome they may find. The first 3 ships landed on and colonized the remaining planets within their solar system. While smaller than Sistel, these planets contained many resources that Sistel lacked, and once trade lanes had been established, these resources uplifted the Sluikan civilization to new heights of society. The remaining ships left their home system and traveled to a nearby system that the Sluikan had called Kralit, the Sluikan word for destiny. When they had arrived, they found 2 massively huge planets tucked away in a binary system. These planets were both easily 3 times the size of Sistel, and appeared to have many different climates. The Sluikan invaded these worlds without any delay, and began to systematically wipe out the inhabitants on them. While neither race was very advanced, they did have massive populations that outnumbered the Sluikan 17-1, but this did not stop the Sluikan. In battle, no race was as violent, as determined, as vicious as the Sluikan. Actually, it should be, not was, but is. No prisoners were taken. Every last alien was hunted down and killed, to the child. After outposts had been established and communications set up to Sistel, more colonists were directed to these planets to begin proper colonization. This is a common theme in how the Sluikan expand their empire for generations, invading, genocide, and colonization. This continued on and on until the Sluikan picked a fight with a dog bigger and stronger than them, the Adent. The resulting loss was a blow, and I'll go more into that battle in a future event lore piece on the website. The resulting loss was a blow to the Sluikan pride, and it forced them to reevaluate their methods. After their encounter with the Adent, the Sluikan became aware of the Galactic Empyrean, an alliance of many highly advanced races in a pact of mutual benefit. It would be Vorth's final and greatest achievement to see the Sluikan admitted as a member race before he was assassinated by a hardline faction of his government. Even so, it may not have mattered. Many believed that Vorth was on his deathbed. He had already lived 3 Sluikan lifespans, and none of their medical specialists could figure out where the source of his longevity came from. In any case, the Sluikan were now part of a vast galactic empire and stood to reap the benefits from that. Though it would not always be easy, especially since their expansion was highly controlled, while their worlds were very overpopulated. In some cases, the old ways started to rear their ugly heads, and small wars would break out between different blocks of Sluikan on various worlds. There was, however, a large intercolonial war that forced the Parliament to grant the Sluikan seven new systems for colonization, or else they would have been faced with a probable extinction after the hardliners on Sistel forced the military to blockade several of their richest planets and, let's see, forced the military to blockade several of the richest planets and demanded that the resources be diverted to Sistel. What was not given was taken by force, and the Sluikan Empire was split in two. Again, I think this, is some, I guess, well, let's see. Yeah, I'll go into that one as well more later on. This will become known as the Strotok by the Sluikan, which loosely translated means civil war. Eventually, the Sluikan would get into a couple of wars with the Terrans. The largest of these was a 7-year war, at the end of which the Sluikan nearly destroyed the Terran race with the help of a mysterious race calling themselves the Juicelorth. Due to their actions during this war, the Sluikan faced harsh penalties by the Galactic Parliament, though they dared not expel them, as now the Sluikan had the strongest military of any race in the Alliance. And that's kind of the revised version of the race description, I guess you could say, and some of the race history. So, actually, I think it's a little bit better than what I have on the script over here. I'll do the one for the Telvari that I have here, because I think that's going to be better as well. Do I have one for Terran? Terran, the Terran one is a lot smaller. But the Telvari and the Sluikan I went through and redid it when I put it on there. So let's also do the Telvari from there. The Telvari are one of the most ancient galactic races still in existence. One politicist someone who studies intergalactic politics, labeled them as a kind of apex species, a race that had been tested time and time again by extinction, and had been able to rapidly adapt to the problems poised to wipe them out from existence. There is, in fact, some truth to this assertion, however also falsehoods. About 3 millennia ago, the Telvari, which had been very predominant in the galactic community, withdrew their empire from the intergalactic parliament, and indeed from the galactic community as well. It was not done out of anger or rejection of ideals. They just decided one day that their empire would no longer benefit from inclusion. This is probably the only outward signs that trouble was on the horizon for this very advanced race. It had been several centuries since the last time their world had faced impending doom. Old Terran scientists called them extinction events, or events that, if allowed to occur, would result in mass extinction of a species on a planet. The Telvari had faced such events many times in their long history, from 5-mile-wide asteroids to virulent plagues. Every time they had managed to overcome these problems with their technological advancement. No other race, besides maybe the humans, have the same flair for technology that the Telvari do. But alas, there are even some problems that technology cannot fix. The Telvari are a very private race and prefer not to involve others in their business, no matter the circumstances. This has made them very popular for jobs that require discretion above all else. More than one great assassin has been Telvari. It was this same reclusiveness that also hid their goings-on within their empire and on their homeworld of Teltra, yeah, for the most part. Every now and again you would hear of certain things happening. I actually have year there, that's why it was like, took a second there. You would hear certain things happening if they were big enough, such as the election of a new Grand Orator, or trade disputes, that kind of thing. However, there was a time when the chatter from the Telvarian Empire was at its highest, and it also happens to be the year that the year that the Telvari Empire fell. I wouldn't necessarily call it falling, but I don't know. I think fell might be too strong of a word. They didn't, the race didn't die off. The empire didn't really fall, but it was thrown into a state of immense chaos. Let's put it that way. The Telvarian Empire was one of the oldest, second only to the Dractians. Those that was one of the oldest. Okay, so it was one of the oldest of those. There's an of missing there. Of those that originally formed the Galactic Parliament in a triad with the Telvari. Okay, no, that's describing the Drytians. So, the Drytians, those that originally formed the Galactic Parliament in a triad with the Telvari and the Visar. No, it should be the Adent, not the Visar. No one knows the exact age of. Alright, so I lost my place where I was at, so I'm just gonna start back from the beginning of that paragraph and to deal with some stuff. The Telvarian Empire was one of the oldest in the galaxy. Oh no, yeah, I can now know where it was. And it tried with the Telvari and the Adens. No one knows the exact age, but they placed the core worlds of the Empire at around 8 billion years old. For centuries, the Telvari had been pumping fissile materials into their sun to keep it from its fusion reaction stable. However, it seemed that in around 3405 to 3445, the efforts were having an exponentially lessened effect on their sun. It had begun to cool down and expand. Within a century, Telptra, and indeed the entire habitable zone of the Tel system was gone. The Telvari did not vanish with it, though. When it became apparent that they could no longer prevent the death of their sun, they organized a massive evacuation and moved the capital to Talana, a planet in a much younger solar system, 10 astronomical units away, 10 AU away. However, the Tel system was massive and had 43 planets within its habitable zone, many of them having been placed there by the Telvari throughout the decades to allow for expansion in a limited section of the galaxy. This new system was a far cry from Tel, and it would take multiple millennia to build what they had. As a result, the Telvarian Empire fell apart, and now most anyone ever sees of the Telvari are technology traders that pass through ever so often. So again, it's not really fell apart, it's more, like I said, fell into extreme chaos and disarray, and didn't have really any large influence within the galactic society as a whole. Again, that's not to say that the Telvarian Empire, yeah, it didn't fall apart. I need to fix that. Unlike most races, the Telvari never, in their history, have established a religion. In most spacefaring civilizations, religions were a constant presence before their evolution into a spacefaring species. When asked about this fact by other species, especially humans, the Telvari say, why should those who can explain all through science need blind faith in a theory which precludes all necessity? This is, my imagining of how just kind of insane some of the dialect that the Telvari use is. Let's start from the beginning here. So when asked about this fact, now I can't even talk. That's how bad it gets sometimes. Okay, so when asked about this fact by other species, especially humans, a Telvari will say, why should those that can explain all through science need to place blind faith in a theory which precludes all necessity of evidence and fact? This outlines the Telvarian view of religion. It is something that is something needed by races not intelligent enough to understand that which is unexplained is not necessarily unexplainable. Only that it cannot be explained through the current understanding of the sciences, but that there is an explanation to be found if one looks deeply and hard enough. Also, unlike many other species, the Telvari have never known war between themselves. Many attribute the heightened characteristics of exemplary societal behaviors in the Telvari to their hyper-advancement as a species, even in the early years of the dawning of it. It took the Telvari only 3 centuries what took humans in the Procol millennia to accomplish. The Telvari were exploring their local star clusters within 1,000 years of their evolution, and they have many highly advanced technologies. They are very particular about what technologies they share with others, understanding that giving illustrate race, something that they didn't understand is akin to giving a loaded gun to a child and then walking away. As such, much of their technology remains a mystery, only talked about in general specifics under the harshest laws put into place by the Grand Council, the governing body, the Telvarian governing body. Okay, so that's enough of that. So that's just basically, that's the Telvari and Sluikan updated race description / history. And as time goes on, I'll be adding to these and putting in more stuff, like more historical kind of stuff as well. So it's not done by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, we got to that. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go over kind of a description of the galactic government, an overview of it, and then go into the specifics about it, and talk about some other types of things like that. So I'm just going to go and stop recording this particular video, so that's going to be the end of this one, and we're just going to start up a new mini-series for the galactic government.